G'day Nova fans, today we are going to take a look at the sleek, mean sieging machine that is the Radiant, and we will first start off by having a quick look through at some of the stats that are available on the Radiant. Then we'll go on and have a look at the various skills that she has. We will have a look whether she's going to be any good in PvP, which I will tell you now is pretty much no, and then PvE. And so basically what we've got in here is we've got a set of stats that rank the poor old Radiant down in 38th out of 38th place for Elemental. This is the basically the stats at level 1 on the ship and the stats at level 50 on the ship, and then the ranks down the side here. And so we can see that leadership and power, she's probably somewhere around 2/3 of the way down the rankings. Elemental, worst ship in the game. Initiative, not too great, 32 out of 38 there, probably on a par with some of the other rare ships. And so overall we're not looking at fantastic stats overall. I mean, this Elemental here, base stat of 76 is the poorest there is, but then Radiant is not really going to be using that Elemental stat. What we're really interested in with the Elemental is simply just the fact that she is the Queen of Siege. So let's just hop in here. We'll come out of those challenges we've had running in the background. We'll go in and we'll have a look at the Radiant. Now here we're on level 32. This is not too hard to level up. We'll come to that in a minute. But what we're really looking at when we're getting this ship is this battle group siege damage dealt plus 15, and we'll talk about that in depth in a sec. But just for a heads up, don't bother with trying this ship out in PvP. Basically any other ship is probably going to nail it. I would imagine even a well built Omnus, who is probably at the bottom of the pack and the bottom of everyone's tier lists and is generally horrendous, is possibly still going to beat the Radiant in PvP if it's built well. So without further ado, really the builds we're looking at is quite simply a siege build, and all we have to do is max out this siege specialist here to get our siege damage dealt of plus 15. In terms of other skills available, you probably want to have this rapid recovery in here. That will help you out with some early PvE and getting this thing leveled up. And then personally, in terms of skills just for PvE, all I do is set up personally this rapid assault here, because it has a decent damage output in round 1. That is where it can beat some other ships generally in PvP, but you wouldn't be wanting to put it up against anything that's even half decent. It's not going to get anywhere. It does have an initiative of plus 15, so it will go early. In terms of fighting against other blue or rare ships, not necessarily so with the epics and legendaries. They have much higher initiatives anyway. Do you want to put your points into anything else while you're leveling it up? Well, you could do that. Personally, I don't even bother. I'll show you why in a sec. That one skill there seems to do the job for me. You could, if you wanted to, probably put some points in further up here in these M3 and M5 skills. We'll run through these as to why we don't bother here. The ship power and initiative are not great to start with, so we're not getting a great deal out of that. Extra experience, that's just a complete waste of points. In terms of putting that into your abilities, you're much better off actually just trying to get better and better tiles by using the other skills available to you. So I use skills and abilities interchangeably. It's just a hangover from previous games. First 2 rounds, all allied strike craft standard attack damage plus 3. If you are starting off in a faction that doesn't have access to tanks or mediums, heavies or medium craft, then you might want to think about this, because your assault craft in the light range might be putting out a bit more damage than the others. Do you then want to spend 15 points to open either of these up? Less than damage received minus 5. You might put a point in here to open up a point in there to get this stackable damage received bonus. Medium strike craft, if you've got them available early and you're using them, perhaps you might want to put some in there, but overall I would avoid that. If you're running this thing at a less than mastery level 3, I would be putting my points just simply probably in here, and possibly a little bit in here. and that just saves playing around with the points. These are fairly superfluous. The tier 3 abilities at mastery level 5 are not too bad. We can follow up our round 1 attack that we had there with over here with this defensive stacking, so we deal a bit of damage, and if you've got Vanguard Strikecraft, then you're going to get a little bit of extra defense. It's negligible overall. You're going to get 15 in total, which is nothing in terms of defense on Strikecraft, but you would be able to open up this other skill that does standard damage and prioritizes long range Strikecraft. That's not too shabby. And again, here we've got a Vanguard only, so really anyone can be using Radiant. Its better skills are in the tier 1 abilities anyway. So we'll go through now and have a quick look at what Strikecraft we might actually put on there, and this is where it starts to get a bit more interesting. The thing we need to bear in mind when we're putting Strikecraft on her is that skill gave us 15 extra siege points per Strikecraft. So let's have a quick look at some of the Strikecraft that are available to us, and the two that will stand out the most initially we will look at are the Stonar and the Ograx. The Stonar and Ograx have the best siege Strikecraft in the game. That is because, first up, they are light and they only take up one command point per unit, and each of those command points therefore gives us a siege of 20. So we could, if we had 100 command points on our Radiant available to put Strikecraft into, we would get 100 of these, giving us overall 2000 siege. If we compare that with something that is a bit heavier, and I will just quickly pop into this Ograx here and have a look. The heavy Strikecraft in this game take up 4 command points per unit. So whilst this siege of 48 here is apparently quite high, that actually only equates to 12 siege points per command, and therefore we can only put 25 of these in, and 25 times 48 off the top of my head is 960. You're looking at about 1200 odd, whereas as we saw earlier we had 2000 by putting in one of these. So overall you want to be using close range light Strikecraft. Now, which are the best ones to use? The Ograx and the Stonar have the best. So Stonar, we are starting off in it with Bay 1, and we have got Siegecraft here starting from a T1 with a siege of 13, which is very good for a tier 1 unit, going all the way up to 20. And similarly with the Ograx, we go here from the Gremlin again at 13 up to the Werewolf at 20. Fear not, you don't have to necessarily have particularly these two groups. You can also do quite well in Vanguard, and Vanguard in their first bay have the Claymore with a siege of 18. Not too shabby at all. And I think similarly we've got in various other bays, we've got the, I believe it's Tyrannus. Let's go and have a quick look at that. In Bay 1 we have also got the Zealot at siege 18. And running through, there are a number of other bays and that open up siege 18 and above for us. Unfortunately, some of them don't open until the second or third bay. So in terms of Arcos, for instance, we get a decent siege here, and we got siege 18. But this is on the Sphinx, it's in bay 2, and it wouldn't necessarily be your first choice. And others that we've got the Omega Devourer, I think, is in bay 3 for Omega, and similarly there are some other bay 3 ones. Terra have the Warthog at 18. So that kind of leaves us thinking, what is it that we want to look at when we're starting up, and which in particular, which actual siegecraft should we be looking at? So if I'm just going to pull this up here, and we can see from this that we've actually got the bays or the squadrons as they open up to each faction at the start point. So for example, Arcos here at the top starts off obviously with its own units, but then it opens up the Ograx squadrons next, and you would want to be looking to take the Ograx gremlins and then all the way through up to the werewolves as your main siegecraft. So running through that list, Arcos gets a decent siege available in its second bay, and it's in second squadron, and it's in bay 1, so you wouldn't bother with your Arcos Bay 2 at Siege 18. You would just hang on a little bit longer, maybe a chapter or two, and you've got Ograx open to you. Going through, Ograx and Tyrannus both have got good start siege units, and particularly with Tyrannus, you're probably not going to want to wait till you've opened up the Ograx in the third bay for early sieges. Obviously that comes along sort of fairly soon after a few days, depending on whether you're speed building, using your gold to speed those buildings up, and whether you're really going ultra competitive or not. So that's up to each individual player. If you're in Omega, then you definitely don't want to be using their base for siege. You would wait till you've got Tyrannus open. Vanguard have something decent to start with. Eldarin and Terra both have access to the Vanguard fairly shortly, and Sonar is similar to Ograx in that it opens up a siege ship fairly quickly. So those are really kind of here. These are your starting ideal siege. Obviously you want to get to the point where you get Ograx and Stonar squadrons open to you as you move through the game. Those extra 2 points are going to be worth it on each of those craft, but overall what's driving your overall siege is that Radiant with its skill damage and any officers that you can then put onto that. So if we just go and have a quick look through, we'll see kind of what officers are available to us, and I'm just going to go into my inventory here and pick this up, and I know for a fact if I go into my epic officers, because that's where the siege specialists start, if I have a look through here, you will find in your support that you have a number of officers available that actually have additional siege bonuses. I happen to have Elizabeth here, and if I look at her augment here, I can change that. And in here I've got this one that says Eldarin Siege Weapons, Eldarin Strikecraft Siege +2. That actually is a little misleading, because particularly with Elizabeth, that actually gives my siegecraft any siegecraft rather than just Eldarin ones the bonus, and at that full 5-star augment that goes up to a whopping +12. So on each siegecraft I've got available to me, the siegecraft base would be 20 if I'm running the Ograx or the Stonar lines. I would then add on 15 for each siegecraft for my Radiant skill, and another 12 for the officer. So all up, that's coming up, topping out at 47. Even with the siege strikecraft that have a value of 18, that's still topping out at 45. So the bonus becomes a little bit sort of negligible there, unless you're really trying to sort of, min-max out everything, in which case you want to open up the extra base. So overall what we've learned from that is that Radiant is basically a kind of siege only ship. The main thing to think about her is if you are using her for your siege, then that means that you're not using up fuel on all your other ships to do that siege. If you can sort of max everything out on the Radiant with the officer, remembering that you can switch those officers around at will very easily, even when you're in the field, even when you're marching, you can change those officers, you can change the augments as you go, and the skill becomes really in kind of working out as and when to do that. So that's the Radiant. Overall, she's a great ship. I will just hop in here and just have a little look at some PvE. I do have a report down here so that we can actually see how she does. Let's just pull that up, and here we've got a Radiant on the 200 level tile against the Sylph. There's a few levels lower, but obviously the officers are going to be a bit better. You've got no officers in here at this moment in time in Season 1, and I've got simply here bunch of blue officers, just boosting up that power really to maximize the this rapid assault skill here and to do the damage early. I happen to have a little extra officer hanging around for support that I've banged on there. It's not that essential. I suspect if we go in here and we won't see much in the way of healing taking place. 13,000, oh, that's not too bad. We've actually healed everything here, but most of that will have come from the Radiant skill rather than that sort of paltry healing officer on there. And how long did that combat last? It lasted a full 9 rounds, but I came out of it with my running my Warhammers, Morning Stars on here. I came out of it quite well. Early on I was running this with Warhammers. It was doing respectably well up to 150 tile. I've just swapped over recently to start taking these 200s and bumping the level up further. Higher levels, more command points, more strike craft, more siege damage output. That's all there is to it. Thanks very much for watching that little video on the Radiant. Don't go putting her into PvP. You're wasting your fuel by doing that on other ships, which should be sieging. Keep her in the background, and you will always be useful to a good guild if you've got a solid Radiant. So thanks very much for watching. My name's Silk, otherwise known as SilkWing. Ka kite anō.